Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to go over the SA2 Brainstorm and Graphic Organizer because we are stepping up to a bit of a different essay. For SA2, we're moving away from personal details as we did in the autobiographical narrative for SA1, and we're shifting into argumentative style writing, which means you're going to have to take a side on the Adnan Syed case and then defend that side using evidence from the text and address the opposing view side's points. So what I recommend is that you first start off by reviewing the sample that I have of the SA2 Brainstorm and Graphic Organizer, which I just uploaded for you guys. So let's take a look at that, and I'll go over this with you. Okay, so what we start off with when you start off with the Graphic Organizer is you'll see that I have you brainstorm first. Figure out which side you want to take on this issue. What I'm asking you is, did the prosecution have enough evidence? We're not saying Adnan is guilty or innocent. That's not what we're really looking at here, right? We don't deal in terms of evidence. We deal in terms of guilty or not guilty based on the evidence that we have. So what you're looking at for this essay is, did the prosecution have enough evidence? That's what your claim is going to be. They either did have enough evidence or they did not have enough evidence. So what you want to start doing is listing out that evidence to make your decision, right? So in the left-hand column, it says here, prosecution does have enough evidence, list out the pieces of evidence. On the right-hand side, you see the prosecution does not have enough evidence, list out the things that you think shows that they don't have strong evidence to convict Adnan. And then hopefully after you have this list, you'll be able to see which side you think has the stronger argument or which side fits better with this position you want to take. Then the next step is it says, choose one of the positions above. Prosecution did have or did not have enough evidence. Notice that I have noted right here, no qualifying. You have to take a position. So here on the sample, the position they're taking is that the prosecution did not have enough evidence to convict Syed. All right. And so again, they use the evidence from the chart, and you can see they have, it looks like stronger evidence that the prosecution was wrong here. So they went with that argument. Now you're going to choose two of the texts aside from our podcast, right? Out of the 4 articles that you also read. This sample decided they wanted to use all 4 of the readings, and that's fine. If you want to use all 4, you totally can. I'm only requiring you to use 2. And then from there, you construct your thesis. And remember that a thesis statement is your main idea, right? It's the backbone of your essay. It's the whole point that you're trying to make. And typically, a thesis should have the pattern of topic, claim, evidence, right? You have a topic, you make a claim about that topic, and then you provide the evidence that supports the claim you're making about that topic. So let's take a look at our sample thesis. It says, while the prosecution heavily relied on the testimony of his alleged accomplice, Jay, this testimony was poor evidence as Jay was lying and thus unreliable, unlike Asia McClain. Furthermore, the prosecution used other unreliable witness testimonies, racist bias, fear of Islam, and poor cell phone data, and therefore did not have sufficient evidence to convict Adnan Syed of first-degree murder. So if you look at that thesis, it's clear, right? We can see what they're talking about. We see that it's Adnan's case. We see the claim that they're making. They're saying that the prosecution right here at the end did not have sufficient evidence. And then we see the evidence that they're laying out, right? They're telling us, as I noted here, Jay's a liar, Asia is reliable, and the prosecution used weak witnesses, they were culturally biased, and they didn't use sufficient cell phone evidence. So I look at that and I'm like, okay, that's a clear thesis statement. Topic, claim, evidence, present. I can see their position. I can see the evidence they're going to use to support that argument. That's what your thesis statement should look like. Whether you believe they did have enough evidence or they did not have enough evidence, it needs to be clearly stated in your thesis. And the points you're going to use to support yourself laid out. So then for the bulk of the rest of this outline and graphic organizer, you're just jotting down your ideas, right? So if we look at the first argument, and the first argument is going to come straight out of your thesis, right? So their first point is that Jay was lying and thus unreliable, okay? So they put that right here as their example. Their first argument is Jay is not credible because he lies or is otherwise inconsistent in his testimony. Now, you also want to make sure you address the opposition. What is the other side going to say? And they did that. Jay and the police, that's a little confusing. tells the police, let's just say Jay, tells the police, tells the truth about the important parts of this case. That was a little confusing there. And then you get into the refutation, right? So start off with your argument and the refutation, and then deliver all this evidence. So if we take a look at that, what kind of evidence they're going to use to back up their point that Jay is not credible, even though the prosecution tries to claim that, well, he mostly tells the truth about important things. You're going to come back with them with all the examples that shows, no, Jay's lied the whole time. So one example is that this person is using is about where Jay and Adnan went on the morning of the murder, right? The first thing Jay says is that he and Adnan went to the mall, but then in the second taped interview, he says they went to Security Square Mall. Another one of these major lies is the one that really sticks out to me is Hayes' burial, right? At first, Jay claims that he refused to help Adnan bury the body. And then 2 weeks later, he changes the story and says they both dug the grave. Another one you could use there is the trunk pop, right? How many different locations did Jay say that he saw the body? And you'll take a look at some of the samples. It seems really far-fetched that he can't remember exactly where he was when he saw a dead body. And the different locations he gives are vastly different, right? From Best Buy parking lot to a strip mall in Edmonton Avenue to in front of his grandma's house. He just has changed his story so many times about where he saw Hayes' dead body. So that would be another really good piece of evidence to use in this paragraph. Then you just continue the rest of the outline like this first example did, giving your main argument, right? So second piece, in contrast, Asia McLean was a credible witness for Adnan's defense, but wasn't heard from at the trial. The counter argument, well, the opposition could come back and claim that, well, Asia's memory is not reliable and she could be lying for Adnan. And then in your paragraph, the rest of the paragraph is you trying to prove, no, Asia was a credible witness. And you can acknowledge, right? Yeah, her memory might be slightly unreliable, as is everybody's, but you'd want to give those details about Asia being a very detail-oriented, diligent person. She noted those details down in her planner. She sent letters to Adnan. So she's not just working from the memories in her head. She's working from documentation that she created at the time the incident was going on, right? And then what this person is also going to do here is use the Hayasaki article where they talk about flashbulb memory, and that for some people, a traumatic or really memorable event kind of cements in their head, and for other people, it makes them forget it. So that's a way to use the evidence here in this article. An piece of evidence, or excuse me, an article to use up here in this first one, I would say would be, let me add this to this, is use the Susan Simpson text. She lays out all the different times Jay has lied. And it's really helpful, which is why I had you guys read that article, because she just lays everything out, and she herself is a lawyer, so she's able to pick apart his argument really well. So then, like I said, you're just going to continue on, give your claim, the opposition's claim, and then why your claim is better, right? Your refutation of the counter argument, your details for the paragraph. And then we come down to the conclusion. And don't forget, conclusion has two main parts to it, right? Two main parts to it. First, restate the thesis. You want to remind the audience of your argument points, especially in an argumentative essay when you're presenting lots of different evidence. You want to take them back to your original point. And then there's the second part, and this is the key to making a really strong closing to your essay, is you have to discuss the significance of this topic. It's the so what paragraph. So what? Why does it matter? Why should we care? Why is this topic relevant? Right? And you'll see what this person wrote here. The example is talk about reasonable doubt, which is what we're supposed to be considering when we look at jury our cases here in the United States when we serve on a jury. You have to consider doubt. Is there a reasonable doubt? If there's a reasonable doubt, you're not supposed to convict that person. You can talk about wrongful convictions. We actually do have quite a bit of wrongful convictions in this country. I think the number is somewhere around 20 to 25,000 people who are incarcerated right now are wrongfully incarcerated. You can also talk about the victim, talk about Hay. You can talk about Adnan himself being a victim, especially if he has been wrongfully convicted. Or if there is enough reasonable doubt that he should have not been convicted, then isn't he also a victim? And the sample that they put here, or the idea they put here, is maybe end with a question to the audience, which is a good technique, right? But you don't want to overdo it. So don't just throw a bunch of questions in the intro and in the conclusion and think that your job's done. You want to use one really good question to make the audience think about what you're trying to communicate, so that they walk away thinking about that question. So question's a good way to end an essay, but be cautious about that. And if you're going to use a question, make sure it's a really good, thought-provoking question. Okay, so that's the basic breakdown of the Essay 2 Brainstorm Graphic Organizer. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to shoot me an email, or you can also sign up for a tutorial with our embedded tutor, Miss Priscilla Carrillo. She's great. She's worked with me on this essay before. She knows exactly what you guys are doing, so don't be shy, and feel free to reach out for help. Okay, guys, talk to you soon.